Did you know you didn't respond to my text message, right?
I did realize that.
Okay, good. Good. So
Yeah.
you sent me that text message, and I know it took me a while to respond, but I tried to say in the text message, like, hey man, I thought about it because it's
Yeah.
I don't talk about it. I don't know if you know, but I've never been diagnosed. I've never gone to anybody professionally.
Yeah.
Like I've gone to a therapist now. I've had 2 different therapists, but yeah, I've never been professionally diagnosed as having PTSD.
Okay.
The first time anybody ever even mentioned to me personally, because I think everybody was afraid to say anything, was Parker.
Mm-hmm. Your son, Parker.
Yeah, Parker casually said to me in the kitchen. Now keep in mind too, it was not the best situation because Parker was like, I'm gonna say 15 or 16. He said to me, well, Dad, you know you have PTSD. And that's kind of an eye-opening moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
Quick question before we get too far into the conversation. What are you thinking for your haircut?
bring the sides in as tight as you can get them, fade it out to the top, you know.
You're thinking skin like pretty high?
Oh yeah,
Like up
you
in
can
there?
go higher. Yeah, that's fine.
High and tight?
Yep, high and tight's what I
then-
like.
Are we keeping the beard
Nope.
or are you just keeping the goatee?
Yep, keeping the goatee.
Okay.
Just even it out because it grows way too fast on the right-hand side.
Yep. Sounds good.
Yeah, if we can cut out all the white ones, no, I'm just teasing.
Yeah. So basically, this is my friend Nate, and we're ready to have this barbershop conversation. But I know Nate through my friends Parker and Hunter, and I know Nate as one of those people that is going to be brutally honest with you about what he believes, but he's going to do it with compassion, and he's going to care about you, whether you like it or not. And Nate's been through a pretty wild life through his years, including some time in the military and time owning businesses and all kinds of stuff. And I wanted to just have Nate on here to talk about some of how all those things relate to each other and how some of his relationships have impacted his decisions in life. But yeah, so what do you think, Nate? So you're talking a little bit before we started the haircut about how you've never been diagnosed with PTSD.
No. I was never diagnosed, but like I was saying, Parker was the first person to say it out loud.
Yeah.
And 2 divorces and pretty many other failed relationships, both romantically and personally, and a little bit of awareness, or I can't call it awareness at that point, or I can't call it self-awareness. So awareness kind of helped me understand in different stages that I probably had some lingering, emotional and psychological effects from some of the work I did in the military, and most likely some of the stuff that I dealt with as a child.
Okay. Yeah.
And unfortunately, no one talks to, I shouldn't say no one, unfortunately very few people talk to children about their emotions, so they're, when they become adults or start making adult decisions, you really have no idea how much your childhood impacts every decision you make.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very fortunate to have Sarah and her, not just, I'm very fortunate because she's a wonderful wife and beautiful woman and very smart.
Yeah.
But in this context, her education and her willingness to be understanding and patient, and she's aware that for me, it works best if you explain to me why you're saying what you're saying. So she's helped me understand a lot of the psychology of the decisions I make.
Yeah.
And just as background, Sarah's got a master's degree in psychology and is a behavioral therapist for many years now.
Yeah. So you've had professional help within the marriage, which has been really helpful.
Yeah,
for
and
someone who's dealt with a lot.
right, and it would be, she can't be a therapist to me, but she can.
Correct. Yeah.
She can suggest things to read and sources, and that's what really's helped me out, understanding my own behaviors.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't think anybody does anything knowingly destructive or intentionally destructive to themselves or to a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone is usually trying to help themselves go about life the best way they know how.
Yeah.
Just unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how.
Well, and I think, you know, just like I said, nobody wants to be angry or isolated or feeling miserable. But a lot of times you don't even know you're in it. And without people being kind and compassionate, you know, you just further isolate and then find ways to justify your behavior and your thoughts and your feelings. And that's probably not best.
Now, in your early 20s, would you have ever seen yourself, because I know you as a person who goes to therapy,
Yeah,
and who advocates for people to go to therapy.
absolutely.
Would you ever have seen yourself doing that?
No.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, so I was an airborne ranger in the United States Army. And I was, you know, I was in 3rd Ranger Battalion, which is a little bit different. Some guys you'll meet had gone to Ranger School. Okay. And Ranger School is a very difficult school, whereas Ranger Battalion or anything within the 75th Ranger Regiment is a way of life.
Gotcha.
And I kind of saw that proved out many times. So I was in battalion, and they tend to, and I don't know how it is now. I'm very cautious on speaking of anything current because I'm older and more distant from that. But it was a pretty harsh way of life, and everybody was pretty absolute that we were all doing the right thing, and you kind of have to be to do that work. You can't really look at it and say, well, I might be right, or you know, it's not going to go very well.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I let that value system lead my life. So I would have never suggested somebody go to therapy because I would have said therapy was weak. But
Gotcha.
back then, I would have also said tolerance and compassion and kindness were all weak, because you can't really be any of those and do that kind of work.
Yeah.
Now, the irony is a lot of people, and I'm going to say young men, because at that time women didn't do that kind of work, and I understand there are some women doing that kind of work now. But at that time, young men, a lot of the ones that I did that kind of work with, they came at it from a place of wanting to be kind and wanting to be helpful. So it was a little disappointing for me when I realized that I had lost all of that in order to do that kind of work.
Because the reason you joined was out of that type of place.
Yeah. A lot of the guys grew up in some difficult circumstances, and in those difficult circumstances, they felt like that being an Army Ranger was the best way to use their physical and mental attributes to benefit society. You know, you could theorize that, especially at that time, having, you know, becoming that kind of a force is the best way to keep everyone in our country safe, and anyone else that wanted it and fell under the umbrella of our kind of protective sphere. But you know, nobody tells you going in that you're going to probably lose most of yourself to do so.
Yeah.
And ironically, the better Ranger you were back then, the more of yourself you lost. And it was just a little harsh. I'll tell you, like I'll tell anybody anymore. And that's another thing that I've changed. I'll talk to anybody that really wants to listen or needs somebody to tell them that other people have been there before and have come through stuff. Basically, if I can help somebody anymore by being vulnerable or sharing my emotions or whatever, I'll do it now. But I also kind of gave myself permission to have emotions again, because you kind of lock some of them out when you're having really bad days, you know.
So would you have said that when you were younger, you had that same type of compassion that you've developed now? Or would you say that you've even developed it further on the other side of...
So as a young person, I did have that I had that absolute compassion of always believing that if I could help, I had to help. And that's something I live by today.
And I've seen that for sure.
Yeah. Now, that said, my family, my immediate family, has kind of helped me understand that in a perfect world, maybe there wouldn't be so much need and I could be the person that always helps whenever you can help. Mm-hmm. But I've also learned that if I'm always helping strangers, then I'm not available to help people that are close to me.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I don't like the way that makes me feel, mm-hmm. but I do like that my family and close friends know that, hey, I'm actually available.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons to that. And I haven't found the perfect distribution of kindness and compassion, mm-hmm. but I do my best now, whereas there was a time when I was kind of rigid.
Yeah. And what do you think? You were telling me a little bit earlier that there was a time when Parker kind of maybe said, hey, Dad, so, you got PTSD. What was that the main thing that made you think and start contemplating stuff, or was there kind of a string of things that got you thinking?
So Hunter and Parker's mother, who is a wonderful person and absolutely kind and just really decent, mm-hmm. our marriage ended, and I grew up, my parents were never married, mm-hmm. and I absolutely hated the idea of divorce. Mm-hmm. But then I found myself divorced, so mm-hmm. I actually went to Reading Area Community College just because it was local and more affordable. Mm-hmm. I took a couple psychology classes because my reasoning brain, which obviously everything in a Ranger battalion or that kind of work, those high stress environments, the more reasoning you have, and the more you reason under strong emotional situations, the better off you are. So that's what I had honed.
So more of a survival reason.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. You're reasoning whatever you have to do to survive and function. Mm-hmm. So that led me to psychology classes, because I was like, well, if I'm this intelligent, and I claim to be, not super intelligent in any possible way, however...
You're a thoughtful person.
Yeah, I try, right.
Nothing
right,
else.
Right. I'm a functioning human being, so I have some intelligence. Mm-hmm. So if I claim to be this human being that's going to use intelligence to succeed, I have to learn, because obviously I didn't know enough to not get divorced. So that was the first eye-opening experience of my life, when I, just in a Psych 101 class, found out a few things, but one of them is the first 3 years of life are the most important to who you become. And then the next 3 years are the second most important. Yeah. And if you think about it, those years, you almost have no memory of.
Yeah.
But they affect you in everything you do, because they form, that's when you develop your attachment style and personality in relationship mm-hmm. to everything. So I understood that my childhood had moments where that was probably not correct.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Is that too warm?
No.
You're an Army Ranger. Never.
No, I'm not anymore. Now I'm just a civilian that, probably eats too many donuts. But once I realized that, and I have since realized that almost everyone has some of that foundation that wasn't as strong as it could have been. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't ideal, through no fault of their own.
Yeah.
And maybe not even any fault of anyone else, mm-hmm. just the unfortunate of the circumstances they're born into.
Mm-hmm. We
so
do
then
1.5 on top.
Yeah, you can go as whatever you like.
Okay.
Once you realize that, and then if you take a little bit more classes, and they taught me something that was very profound to me, and that is that anger in a normally functioning human being, so not anybody with like a true mental health disorder,
yeah.
But anger is a secondary emotion. Nobody is instantly angry. They're either frightened or scared or jealous or hurt or embarrassed. A lot of times it's embarrassment. And that's what turns to anger. And that got me, that helped me get to a point where I could forgive others for a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I still couldn't forgive myself. And then further down the road, I had another relationship where I was married, and that ended. And I really kind of had to take a hard look and say, well, maybe just forgiving other people wasn't enough. And I had to learn to kind of give myself a break, And then that's when I got, also being far too reasoning and not nearly enough emotion, I took it upon myself then to make 2 giant tattoos that could always remind me to give people a break and be kind and compassionate and caring and tolerant. And that's when I got my tattoos. And that kind of revelation was really a weekend. I mean, it might have even been a moment if I could go back and analyze it. But I think too often people are, and I don't necessarily understand why, but they're afraid. They feel as though that if they admit that they were wrong for any amount of time, then it invalidates everything. And I would want people to understand that, none of us are born with the knowledge. Like yesterday, I didn't have the knowledge I have today.
Yeah.
So every time you gain knowledge, if you don't use it to move towards something that feels better, why are you having it? I mean, if it's not helping anyone and it's not helping you, then it's not very good knowledge.
Yeah, for sure.
Or it's at least not a good use of it. So that's what kind of got me to really start looking at myself and making an effort. And then when Sarah and I got together, it really moved forward. And, luckily I have tolerant sons and, now, it's a lot easier to be honest with my emotions. And that's, that's, I realize emotions for men get hard and, nobody likes to think of themselves as weak or anything, but everyone can admit to being fearful or prideful or, I would hope everybody can admit to being angry at points. And if you admit to being angry, you have to figure out why.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
And I think kind of going off of something you were saying about how you can't really judge yourself off of what you didn't know.
No.
Is that we only have the knowledge to be upset about what we were with what we've gone through.
Right.
And so going through that is the only reason you can have that realization. So having compassion for yourself and what you've learned is the only way to grow on the other side of that.
Right. Yeah. And that growth, I think everybody, it's kind of like the analogy I'll use is when people make their New Year's resolution and the first time they slip up, then they just stop. They never go back to it.
Yeah.
And that growth is like that. If you stop the first time you go backwards or act out in a way that you didn't care for, it's really easy just to fall back to no growth, and then you're stuck and stagnant.
Yeah.
And it's a hard world, and most of us, especially by the time you're middle-aged, will have had some days where you've been challenged with difficult things out of your control. And some of them you'll look back and say, hey, I did really well. And some, by nature, you're not going to do as well. And it's okay to forgive yourself for that. It's okay to say, hey, man, I messed that up. And you don't have to come up with an excuse. You don't have to come up with a reason. It doesn't have to be, that Mars was in retrograde.
Yeah.
It can just be you're human.
Yep.
And, that's one of the most beautiful things about Christianity. And, you and I have talked about my faith, but I still have some knowledge in it. One of the most beautiful things about it is it's designed to understand that everyone makes mistakes. Now there it's called sinning, and the mistakes are based on Judeo-Christian principles, but I don't think anybody feels great when they're doing something blatantly wrong to their value system.
Yeah, for sure. Now, when you decided, because you would say that you had compassion, in that stage, you were like, I started having compassion for other people, but I didn't have compassion for myself.
Right.
would you say that once you started having compassion for yourself, that your level of compassion for others changed as well?
Yeah, I would say that it was a lot more relatable. It was easier. It was so much easier to be compassionate to others. You know, one of the things I think is, I can't say it's missing, but I wish our society was better. Part of compassion is not just understanding that someone is in distress, but you have to have the desire to help and then try to help. And that's, you know, I think what happened once I was understanding of my own emotional circumstances, then I could help people in a way that was more what they needed and wanted. Before that, I didn't understand that just because I saw a solution, that's not necessarily what they wanted. And of course, sometimes we know now, or I know now, that a lot of times when somebody's telling you something, they don't want you to solve it. They want you to listen. They want you to be there. Now, if they need help, obviously they love when you do, but you got to really help people the way they want to be helped.
Yeah.
You know, that's a hard thing. And sometimes the hardest part for me is to watch somebody struggle and know that they have to struggle on their own, and all I can do is listen.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I think we could all learn to forgive ourselves a little bit more for anything that we know is just our own fragility.
Yeah, and I think anyone who has grown into some sort of change would tell you that it wasn't because someone was rude to them or just was straight up with them and told them like it is. It was usually out of someone showing them compassion and someone being there for them when they knew what was wrong but couldn't fix it for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
I know for me, I went through this time where I was really just getting down on myself. It was only a couple months ago, and I was uncharacteristically late for a lot of things.
Right.
I ended up just dropping the ball a whole bunch of ways.
So one of the things that's going on there, and I don't know if you talk to anybody, and I'm sure I've encouraged you to talk to someone professional, because we wouldn't hire an amateur plumber, we wouldn't hire an amateur mechanic to work on our brakes, I wouldn't hire an amateur barber.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk to your best buddy or whomever about your emotional well-being, you're talking to an amateur.
Yeah, for sure. With
something that is the most important thing in your day-to-day life, which is your emotional well-being. So it's absolutely imperative that you talk to a professional. And the irony is, they don't even have to be that good. They can literally be, the lowest trained professional that you can find, and they're still trained. They're better than. You think about some of the advice you get from people. Yeah. Most of the time it is, well, just be happier. Well, that doesn't work.
You just got to keep pushing through.
Oh yeah, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah, that's a great advice.
Yeah. And I would have said all these things until I realized, well, first of all, they don't make any sense. When you reason it out, they just, if you could have pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, you would have. And if it was good to just talk to your best friend, you would have. So that's why, I found I couldn't put my finger on what helps when I go into a therapist, a professional therapist. I could have never said, and to this day would never be able to say, oh, it was this one bit of information, or it was this one time, or even a cumulative effect. But just talking to someone with the training, it's no different than any other knowledge. They impart knowledge that isn't inherently known. When we're born, we have a set of skills inherent in all of us, and we can either develop those skills or, squash them down and make other skills. But none of us are taught how to deal with the emotional turmoil of today's society.
Yeah.
much less to society as you were born into it. I mean, you're still a young man, but it was a different world 25 years ago. You know?
Yeah.
And then to rationalize and be able to evaluate the impact of other people's emotional well-being on yours, man, it's beyond us.
Yeah.
You know, and of course I wanted to prove to myself and my rational brain that going to a therapist wasn't something that was weak or what have you. So I looked up. I mean, there's a lot of really strong people that have gone to see therapists, you know, famous people. And, you know, the bottom line, nobody makes fun of you or nobody feels weak if they go to a gym to get stronger physically. And that's what going to a therapist is for your mind or for your emotions.
Yeah. And I think the best thing we can do is, like in my scenario when I was really just like going through it, was the people that were in my life that helped me, that did what they should have done. They didn't try to fix it. They didn't try to explain it away. What they did was they were there for me.
Yeah.
And I wrecked my friend's surprise birthday party. And I felt so bummed about it. I was like, this is just the end of the line. Like, it's over, you know, it's blown up in your mind because you're like, there's all these other things, and this is the last thing. I showed up a day early to his birthday party. And I was like, oh man, I felt so bad. So he's like, you know what? While you're here, let's hang out. And I blabbered to him about all my issues and all my struggles, and he just listened. And he offered kind words, but he didn't try to fix my problems. And he just offered me compassion. The next day, on the actual surprise birthday, I show up, and he acts as, they treat the whole surprise birthday as if the surprise was that he'd be surprised who was showing up, which was the truth. The surprise plans changed, that would be the surprise.
Right.
They didn't tell anyone else at that party that I wrecked the surprise party. All they did was say, they made it almost seem awkward for them that they didn't explain it well. But instead, they made me feel, they covered for my mishap.
Yeah,
because they knew that it mattered more than making a funny joke about it or trying to make them feel well. They knew, and I talked to him later, he's like, dude, honestly, that wasn't even something that we thought too hard on. Like, it was just automatic for us that we wanted that to happen. And it literally changed the trajectory of my whole outcome of how I was going in that season of life. And it's through that we can say, hey, first of all, I need to talk to a licensed person, someone who's professional.
Yeah.
But what can we do as friends, as coworkers, as people around?
Well,
show compassion.
Absolutely. So, just as human beings, I mean, I'm talking to the stranger that walks by. You know, our society right now, and this is I'm not qualified to say this or to prove this out. This is just an average Joe observation. Our society is fairly, and when I say our society, I want to be clear. I'm speaking of the typical day of you or I or most people that come through this shop. They didn't face anything that dangerous that day. You know, don't get me wrong. There's guys, and I'm not going to think of them all. So there's guys in construction. There's women in difficult jobs and in difficult careers. There's all kinds of financial stressors. But very few people that come through are worried about, you know, whether they're going to be able to eat. They're not worried about whether they're going to get back home ever. You know, it's not like we're stuck on the Mediterranean Sea in a makeshift raft trying to get away from dire situations, knowing we're going into others. Which there are people like that right now, unfortunately. So we're all very fortunate, but that doesn't mean that it's always easy. And it doesn't mean that we should not be compassionate or aware that someone else is having a bad day. You know, and when we become aware of it, you're kind of obliged as a human to at least be kind at the very least. You know, a little do no harm goes a long way, and even better is try to help. And even like your buddy did, just being in that situation, it sounds like they were just kind.
Yeah.
You know, there is no one that benefits when anyone feels badly.
Yeah.
Especially about themselves or about their own actions. You know, that's I can't think of a single time when that's benefited anyone.
Yeah.
One of the things, so oftentimes I try to help people, even if it's just like you're in a grocery store and you see somebody struggling to get something off the shelf, so you help them.
Yeah.
It's surprising to me how often they're surprised that I helped.
Yeah.
You know, Parker and I one time years ago, it was a very, very hot day. And when I say very hot, historically hot and humid in Pennsylvania. And I was on my way home from work and I saw a vehicle on the far side of 78, Route 78, the interstate, shut down. You know, their vehicle had a flat tire, and the gentleman trying to fix the flat tire was in a suit and tie. He was down to his white t-shirt. He was, you know, you could see he was struggling.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a Lincoln Town car. It was a nice car. It was, you know, it was obviously somebody that doesn't normally do those sort of things. So I ran home quick, and I got Parker, and I came back and, you know, went down the highway that way, and we pulled in behind and got out, and not like a pit crew necessarily, but I would imagine it looked a little bit like that. We helped this gentleman, and, you know, he and us had very little in common in a day-to-day circumstance. You know, he was, I'm not going to presume to know where he was coming from or what he was doing, but he just, you know, you could tell he was in a much higher financial circumstance than we typically would have been. But we got done helping him, and it was hot and we were sweated, and he said to us, "Why are you doing this?" And he was exacerbated. He just couldn't understand why we had taken time to do this. And to us, it really wasn't a big deal. I mean, we jacked his car up, you know, changed the tire, got him on his way. And when he went to give us money, we said no, because, well, we didn't know his circumstances, and you know, we didn't need any money at that moment. You know, don't get me wrong, I'm sure I had some bills that were probably behind, or who knows what. But whatever he was going to give us wasn't going to change my circumstances, and I didn't know if it was going to hinder or hurt his. So it just didn't seem to make sense. And I think he was baffled. But the sad part to me is, no one should be surprised that somebody stopped to help. They should be surprised when somebody doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, especially with the number of people driving by on Route 78. You know, that our society as modern humans, unfortunately today, and I was trying to get to this earlier and I lost track and I apologize. We value financial success more than anything else on earth. And it's allowed people like a Harvey Weinstein, and I can say that because he's convicted. You know, it's not speculation.
Yeah, it's not
and it's not like I know him or I didn't, you know, do anything. But it allows those circumstances because we only value income and wealth and possession. You know, well, I wonder today what would people have thought of, you know, people who had nothing. You know, would Mother Teresa be considered kind today, or would she be considered a fool? And I just can't imagine how, if we continue like this, we're not all going to become isolated and jaded and distrustful of each other.
That's good. What's some closing advice you would have to someone who's listened to this and kind of wants to gain some insight from this?
Don't ever think that you're that strong or that intelligent or whatever good attribute that you can overcome the stuff you struggle with by yourself. And don't think it's weak or abnormal or any negative attribute to ask for help. It's quite ironically, first of all, it's a very freeing experience to say, "Hey, I need help," and it's and that's in every possible way. And then, most importantly, you actually can get the help. You know, we have to, and then go further and don't ever judge anybody else for getting help. You know, understand that the world is not kind, and the only thing we can do is be kind to each other and You know, whether it's based out of a religious aspect or an inherent inner desire to want to see society as a whole rise, understand that the more love you can show each other, and even strangers, like even simple, silly things like put the cart back, man.
Yep.
Pick up the trash when it blows past you, or you know, when somebody cuts you off, don't be rude to them.
Yeah.
Because you don't ever feel better. You know, be kind.
Yeah.
And I know it's cheesy, and I know it's not strong, and it's not, you know, it's never gonna make a catchy. I mean, there's things that say be kind now, and there's those of us that buy them, but being kind is not a catchphrase. It can't be a slogan. It has to be a way of life. So be kind to yourself. Get help when you not when you need it, but when you should.
Yeah.
And if you make a mistake and wait too long, get help then.
Yeah.
Like literally, whatever. And forgive yourself. And others. Just forgive them.
Yeah.
It's so easy, yet so scary and hard.
Thanks, Nate.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, man. It's amazing to me how much better my hair looks when you cut it.
Is it good?
Sure.
How's it good?
Absolutely. Great. What did you do? Just cut off the one side? Did you see how uneven it was?
Yeah, I just kind of evened it out.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
It was, honestly, that's one thing I can do is I can kind of even it up,
Yeah.
but it grows back so lopsided.
Oh, man.
Do you journal? Do you journal? Dude, I'm trying to journal,
Yeah.
and I'm finding that the starting point is the hardest spot.
Yeah.
I can't get past it.
Did you start journaling?
No, like I said, I can't get past the start.